Bramborough back with Grand Tactician Civil War, and we're starting a new campaign. This is a Confederate States of America CSA start in summer 1861. Worth noting, during the break between end of the last Union series and now, the 1.09 beta version has become available, and that's what we're playing here. Trying a few different things this time around, in addition to checking out more of the most recent features from 1.08 and 1.09. This first episode is pretty long, but we're covering a lot of info like basic strategy, economy, policies, projects, Army organization, viewer units, and initial buildings. Oh, by the way, about the thumbnail. This isn't a random spam of folks here. Without looking it up, no cheating. Do you know off the top of your head who all 8 of these guys are? And what's the one thing that these particular CSA generals have in common? I'll mention what it is in one of the upcoming episodes. I'm very much looking forward to playing this campaign, and I hope you're looking forward to watching as well. Let's get into it. Let's have a look at some of the new officers we're going to have in this campaign. 1.08 introduced the avatar system by which you can have quite a few additional officers in a campaign. I'm not going to use a lot of them, but there were some requested for viewer units, and so I've made a few here. Anders Stecken is going to command the Swedish Caroline Brigade. And what I did for most of these, they're going to be commanding infantry brigades in most cases. And I've gone ahead and given them the West Point modifier for professional. I've made most of them infantry officers. And some, not all, I gave the Mexican War experience so that they start with a little bit of fame. And just in general, I went with basically 2 stars in initiative and cunning and 3 stars in leadership and administration. Right? Hector Davila from Texas will be leading the Cazadores Españoles Regiment. Or brigade, rather. Henry Shelton from North Carolina, based on a real general who is still living, is a modern day general. West Point and infantry seemed appropriate for him. He was an airborne officer. Commanded the 82nd Airborne Brigade, and he will be commanding the 82nd All-American in this campaign. He was actually from North Carolina. His birthday is actually January the 2nd. Obviously, I couldn't make it the same year. I don't know why I didn't get. I forgot to give him the Mexican War. So let's give him that. There we go. So let's I hope this doesn't mess things up. Yeah. Okay. Got Josie Wales from Missouri, and in this particular case, it just didn't seem right to make him a West Pointer. So Josie's a volunteer in this case, and he's going to be leading a Missouri unit. No name was specified, but I think it's just going to have to be the Outlaw Brigade, isn't it? No unit was requested, but one person was interested in having an Avatar commando, so here we go. Noah M.W. Winslow, which I believe is Noah Maximilian Werner Winslow. And made him from Missouri, just because I think that's the state that was available. But he's a West Pointer. He can command a brigade from any state. The Green Jacket Volunteers will be commanded by Paul Reynolds. Initially, I thought, well, I don't think we have a Reynolds available. And then I realized, well, I could just make a Reynolds. So here you go. Paul Reynolds will be commanding that unit. I figured, what the hell? I'll have my own too. So there's me. I forgot to give myself Mexican War. But I'll develop this guy up, and he'll actually see some divisional command and maybe corps command if it works out. There will be a Bram somewhere in the army doing something if he doesn't get killed. Robert F. Graham will be commanding the Graham's Legion from South Carolina. And there's only so many portraits, right? It doesn't take long to cycle through them. So some of the guys have got, like this portrait's been used twice, this portrait's been used twice. Only so many to go around. And then finally, the Ryan's Raiders will be led by Ryan Barley. And in this case, of course, it was specifically requested to be a Cav unit, so this is a Cav guy. Alright, so it's going to be fun to see how these guys develop. There were also some other officers requested who are actual historical. John Marmaduke, Richard Taylor, Wade Hampton, Robert H. Anderson, and Patrick Claiborne will be leading brigades. And I guess they'll stay leading brigades all the way through the war, even though some of these guys would probably be divisional or even corps commanders in a normal campaign. But anyway, that's how that's going to go. Just to kind of show how this works. So you've got various, because I need to create one more. So you can let me see if I can find a portrait I haven't used yet. That looks pretty dandyish. The Durham Light Infantry, requested by Worms and Warriors. And he said, Commander, anybody you like. Okay, well, that's what we got then. This is, here's your guy. There you go. Anybody you like will be commanding the Durham Light Infantry. It looks rather dandyish there. I need him to be infantry. And, let's see. He's a West Pointer, so it doesn't really matter which state he's from. But, Durham Light Infantry. So we'll make him from North Carolina. We'll pick a random birth date. And November 3rd, 1825. And kind of the same stat. And so you can click through here for the portraits. There's only about, 7 or 8 there. You can change the frame. Just give them a nice bright frame there. And you can click between professional or volunteer. On the professional side, you can put in the Mexican War, the West Point, and then pick their branch. And on the volunteer side, Mexican War is still an option, and you can make a political or a volunteer officer here. I went with professional for almost all of these, the one exception being Josie Wales, because it just didn't seem right. And the reason I did that is all these guys are going to start as captains. They're not going to be present in the order of battle, and so I made them all West Pointers so that they won't lose too much of their initial experience, because I'm going to bump them all up to colonel to take command of these brigades. So that's why most of them are West Pointers, and just the fact that, and just to give them a branch to match the unit that they're going to command. We'll see how much Josie Wales loses bumping up. Surprisingly, a lot of times they really don't lose a lot of XP. And then the way these things work down here is you get so many. Let's just zero all this out. So you get some amount. You get some amount of attribute points. It's actually 220. For some reason, there's just a little sliver here on fame. You can't actually give fame in the attributes except through giving them the Mexican War experience. And that gives them about a star's worth, but it does take a few points. And then you just apportion like so. And 2332 sounds good to me. It's a pretty decent officer. So if you wanted to go much higher, you know, you could make a 4 leadership guy, but you'd have to drop one of the others to 1 star. And there you go. We'll create anybody you like to command the Durham Light Infantry. All right, campaign setup. Obviously, we're going to go CSA. Summer 1861. I considered doing a different start date for this campaign. I really thought about doing spring 1862. However, one of the big recent changes that we didn't really explore in the last campaign is the weapons standardization, weapons procurement change. And I thought maybe that would get kind of messed up for comparison's sake with a different start date from what I've typically used before. Plus, I just like the summer 1861 start. So we're going with that. I am not going to go very hard difficulty this time around. It adjusts national morale, available recruits, casualty ratios, experience game morale, recovery, military experience, and fighting spirit. There is a pretty common argument that is made about this game on the forums and discords and things that very hard actually kind of in some ways makes things easier because the AI units are so stubborn that they will take an immense amount of casualties before routing. So they are hard to rout. Or they're harder to rout on very hard than on other difficulties. However, they wind up suffering a lot more casualties that way. And so there's a balance there where you just wind up inflicting a lot of casualties. I have been reading on the unofficial Discord that some people are saying that they're finding kind of the best balance, the best results, and therefore are finding the most difficulty in terms of AI behavior, both campaign and tactical, by going mediocre, right? So I'm going to give that a try. The AI should be a little bit less aggressive, but not just like run headlong into you and to their own detriment as much, is what I'm reading. And that combined with some of the recent changes in 1.08 and 1.09, which we are in now, well, we'll see. We'll see how it goes. I'm going to keep it on historic behavior. I've talked about that before in previous episode 1s. If we go random, that isn't just about starting policies. It's also about AI campaign personalities. Some of them are pretty challenging. There's like expansionist and militaristic. which make them even more aggressive than just the aggressiveness. And also on the militaristic personality, they just recruit insanely, regardless of what you do. However, there are also some other personalities where the AI just completely gimp themselves. We saw this in one of my earlier Union campaigns, several campaigns ago, where I went random and they just, the CSA AI just did not recruit in that campaign. Just didn't recruit. I think, they may have gotten up to around 90 to 100,000 max. And then after taking some more losses, they didn't recruit anymore. And the reason why that happened is they completely overemphasized diplomacy projects and never took military too. And the reason for that was because we got the diplomatic personality, and so I avoid random because I think there's just too much chance there of the AI doing something not even more suboptimal than it normally does. And the best balance in the to kind of get the most balanced is just to go historic for AI personality reasons. Okay. As far as my own projects or starting policies, I always like Apostles of Disunion. I'm going to take that. I always like industrialization. I'm going to take that. With the new weapons procurement system and how slow it is to get things going, I'm really, really tempted to go with arms agents. Just because we need every rifle we can get at the beginning. However, the other thing about this is it makes Springfields available, and I don't intend to pursue Springfields, even if I had this. It just doesn't fit with what I plan to do for projects. So I'm not going to take it. I want to take something I've never tried before. Even if it's not necessarily the best one. I've never played a campaign with filibustering. I'm going to try this because, just to do something different. As far as the realism options, order delays, fog of war, readiness system, but I leave feuds turned off. And that's because I perceive that it hurts the AI more than it hurts the player. For every one feud I've ever seen in my own brigades, you see 4, 5, 6 among the AI. So I leave feuds off just because it's a little thing to kind of help the AI. And definitely turn auto manage options off. All right, start the campaign. All right, here we are in the campaign. Before anything else, and I'll talk a little bit more details later, but just a quick kind of nutshell idea for what I'm going to try to do in this campaign. And it's something a little bit different. I'm going to be completely defensive and static in the West. I'm not going to try to take Kentucky. I'm not going to try to take Missouri. I might fight a battle in Missouri, or I don't know yet, just to fulfill one of the strategic objectives, to win in Union territory. I'm not sure. We'll see how that pans out. The idea of that is if the AI broadly does kind of react to the player on the campaign map. And my idea is if I don't mess with Missouri and Kentucky, then the Union may not mess with Arkansas and Tennessee. And if I don't recruit a lot of troops in the West, then the Union may not either, and just kind of keep the whole area might be quiet. I've kind of seen that tendency before in some ways, that I didn't really fully flesh out, and I've also read other people say the same thing. I want to see how far that really goes. It may turn out not to be the case at all, right? Well, that was wrong, and we have a lot of fighting, and then we'll just have to adjust. But I'm intending just to have one little army in Arkansas, one little army here around Nashville and these forts, and not go up in here and just see how the Union reacts to that if they're really that passive. Therefore, I don't intend to have a whole lot of troops over here. We'll have some, right? I'll have an army here, an army here. But that'll free up most of our recruiting efforts to go into Virginia, where I expect there to be a lot of fighting. I do intend to put an army around Knoxville because that's an important area because of the one and only iron mine. But anyway, that's the general idea. Purely defensive in the West, do a lot, put most of our effort and do most of the fighting in the East. Is that because I think that's a fantastic strategy and it's better than what I normally do? Not really. I'm just kind of interested to see what happens in the West if I don't do anything. And also just to kind of do it a little bit different, right? I've done the thing where you send a unit up into Missouri, and Missouri just kind of tends to become just this enormous drain. As Confederacy, you come up in here, and the Union will send army after army after army after army after you. And we've kind of been down that road in the last CSA campaign. So we'll do it a little bit different this time. Of course, that'll wind up happening somewhere else. But that's the general overview, the idea behind how I'm going to conduct this. All right, let's take a quick look at the strategy tab at the campaign start. Objectives on the left, and these should be pretty familiar to most people. The goal of the game is to break Union morale and get it down to below 25. Not 25, it's got to be below 25. So really, got to get them to 24. Found that out in the last campaign. This is the win condition right here. Capture Washington, D.C. Yes, I will if I can. In the past, at least in one campaign, I explicitly stated I wasn't going to take Washington, D.C., at least during the first year or so of the war, because of the big morale hit. With all the changes that have been done in 107, and 108, and now 109, if the opportunity comes up, I'm going to do it. Winter major battle, it'll happen in the normal course of things. This is, if we can get their support down to below 60 by November 1862, then that's not quite a game winner, but it starts a steady decline. This is pretty much a game winner here, if it happens. I've never actually seen this kick in, either because the campaign completely ends before then, or it's actually pretty low to drive from either side. It's pretty low to drive support below 60 in either direction. What typically winds up happening at the end of a campaign is that, the national morale has tanked below 25, but support typically remains reasonably high. And you'll see, national morale at like 30, but support remains at 90. Don't know if we're going to do capture 3 cities. Not 100% sure we're going to do win in Union territory. Possibly. I do not intend to pursue capture Kentucky and capture Missouri. And then winning consecutive land and naval battles, that'll just kind of happen or not in the case of naval, in the normal course of things. National morale starting high, both sides. It's actually a little bit lower for us because of one of the starter policies I took, I'm sure. High support both sides, high morale both sides. 70,000 men in the field now for them, about 50,000 for us. Pretty standard stuff. One thing that's a little bit different is we're starting with a pretty good edge in military experience, 19 to 13. And I think that's coming from the filibuster starter policy. Also worth mentioning, Cuba and Nicaragua are part of the Confederacy because of that starter policy. So that's cool. I don't think they're even shown on the map. They're down off the edge. Let's talk finances, projects, and policies. All right, not too much here on the finance screen. We're starting with a tiny deficit. Of course, this will grow, and there's things we need to do to counteract that. Subsidy levels. I'm going to leave politics about where it is. I'm going to have a little bit coming in on political subsidies, and eventually we're going to need more political subsidies anyway in order to have more than 7 policies. I'm going to leave economy about where it is. The economy projects, it's just not something I want to max out subsidies for. As they slowly accrue, we'll get a little market reform or something, but I don't want to max this out. Agriculture, yes, max. Industry, yes, max. Military, absolutely. Max. Got to have this. Got to have these. Got to have these. At some point, possible I might back off agriculture a bit, but not at the beginning. And we'll talk more about that when we get to projects. Diplomacy, I'm going to go ahead and max it at the beginning. This is something that might get dialed back as well at some point. But that's how I'm starting off with subsidies. And of course, I'm leaving tariffs and sales tax maxed out, and tariff will increase at some point in the relatively near future, I think. Let's hop over to projects. Sort by subsidy type. Political, I am not going to pursue building railroads. I just do not believe that building railroads, which take a long time and are exorbitantly expensive, I just don't believe that the return ever comes from the investment. So I'm not pursuing railroad construction. I think I will take a couple levels of admin reform in order to speed the research of policies. I don't really think we're going to need any of these various propaganda type projects. I don't intend to occupy a lot of Union territory, and even if I do, I don't know if I'm going to particularly care about the Union and Confederate support in that occupied territory. And generally speaking, I just don't think we're going to have a huge problem with support in our own states, with the possible exception of Virginia. I do not intend to take Kentucky, so that shouldn't be a problem. And another thing about Kentucky is just because it is not a Confederate state does not mean that recruits will not be available from Kentucky. And I have this notion that Confederate support in Kentucky as a Union state might actually stay higher than if we try to make it a Confederate state. Because when Kentucky secedes, a lot of it stays under Union control, and then you got to do a lot of fighting, got to free up some more cities, and all that just steadily drives Kentucky support down to where, it's not usual for it to be down in the 30s. Whereas if we just leave Kentucky alone, our support there may stay high enough that any units we recruit from Kentucky may be better off. So we'll take a little bit of administration reform just to get those policies coming faster. Already talked about economics. Improved credit rating is pretty attractive, except for that it's so exorbitantly expensive anyway, and it's just one notch. I just don't know if that's worth pursuing. Subsidized banks. We only have one bank, so I'm not sure that this is worth the money. And we can't even build, even if I wanted to, can't even build more banks until Chapter 3, because you have to have the Bank Act first, and that doesn't even become available until later in the campaign. And that's the main reason I'm not that interested in pursuing in maxing out econ subsidies, is because there's just not much here to warrant it. A little bit of market reform will be useful along the way. To the extent that we get econ subsidies, this is where it's going to go. Ag. Farm mechanization. As I've brought up multiple times before, I always try to point this out in other campaigns. Each level of this project further increases farm output, which is good, but increases available volunteers. And oh, by the way, 10% per level, which is more than one gets from recruiting offices on the military side. Recruiting offices gives you 5% per level of this. Farm mech is 10% per level. That's why I want that ag subsidy maxed out. I want a couple levels of this pretty quick. Once that's done, additional agricultural subsidies will go into agricultural buildings like farms and mills. We'll just have to see how the supply and demand situation is for those things once we get to that point. Industry, it's not, I want to maximize industry subsidies, but not really because of these projects. They're okay. I'm not saying they're worthless. I did kind of focus more on these projects in the last campaign, and I didn't see a huge effect. Industry subsidies are going to go into industry buildings. Priority number 1 will be upgrading our iron mine near Knoxville. Then we'll look at lead mines and copper mines. We'll see if upgrading those are needed. I suspect they may not be. And then industry subsidies will go into industry buildings like foundries, lumber mills if needed. I don't know if we're going to need those, but foundries and factories. Factories are huge. Factories is where the food is made. On the military side, there's just a ton of projects, but I am going to do something a little bit different in this campaign. I'm going to want organization reform, logistics reforms, and these logistics reform in particular, that is a cost-saving project that's pretty effective. The sooner I get to this, the sooner we start controlling our Army upkeep costs and our supply costs. So I want to try to minimize all these other weapons projects that come before that. This is what I'm going to do. Again, not saying this is the best possible strategy, but it's one I'm going to try here in this campaign. Legacy Rifles is a great project. It gets you, if I can click it, there we go. Because it gets you Mississippis, which are fantastic. And also the Plains Rifle is very good as well. I'm not going to take it. What I'm going to do in this campaign is I am going to take if I can find it. I'm going to do Confederate rifles, and I'm going to do cast artillery. That's it. That's all I'm doing. Why am I doing that? Because this looks to me like the cheapest way to cover all the bases among all three arms. It gets you some pretty good weapons. Not the best weapons, but pretty good weapons that will do fine. And the reason I'm going with Confederate rifles is if I were just worried about infantry weapons and I was only going to take one, it would be legacy rifles. But if I take legacy rifles, I also have to take a carbine project for the Cav. Confederate rifles would get us not only Fayetteville and Richmond rifles for the infantry, which are pretty good. They're long range. They're not quite as accurate. They're mediocre accuracy, but the Fayetteville is a 500-yard range weapon, and the Richmond is a 450-yard range. So these will outrange the Springfield rifle muskets of the Union at the same accuracy. Okay, so I'm pretty happy with these, but it also gets us the Richmond carbine for the Cav. So by taking this Confederate rifles, I don't have to have both an infantry and a cavalry project. I can knock it out with one. That's why I'm trying it this way. Like this low-cost Cav carbine, these give you some decent rate of fire weapons, but very short range, 200 yard. So I like the medium range carbine for Maynards and Merrills and stuff. This is a 2.3 million, and Legacy is a 1.5. So that is a total of 3.8 million in subsidies needed to unlock both of these. Whereas Confederate is 2. We're covering our infantry and our Cav weapon needs from projects at about half the cost. So it's going to take a little bit longer to get to this than it would take to get to Legacy, but it'll come a lot faster than doing Legacy and medium range carbines. I know the same idea with cast artillery. Rifled or Parrots, 2.5, whereas cast is 1. And the cast artillery gives you some pretty good weapons. It gives you this. It gives you the 12. Gives me the Napoleons, which I think are probably about the best smoothbore weapon in the game. And also the 14-pound James, which is a very accurate rifled gun. The drawback to this is the James does not have the range of, the 3-inch ordnance and the Parrots and the Wireds. But again, we're knocking out, we're getting ourselves some pretty good artillery pieces for a lot less cost in projects. And we'll be able to get them standardized and coming quicker. The other nice thing about this is they are less complex. Therefore, the standardization on them should rise faster once this project is unlocked. Therefore, we should be able to start getting pretty good numbers of artillery faster with cast artillery than we would with rifled or Parrots. One other option is the Confederate guns, which gives us the Iron Napoleon and the Williams. I am somewhat tempted to try that as well, but I think I'm just going to go with the cast artillery. Notice machine gun project is not available on the Confederate side. Essentially, the Williams gun in the Confederate guns is the Confederate version of the machine gun, but it doesn't fire nearly as fast as either the Gatling or the coffee mill on the Union side. I'm just going to go with the cast artillery, kind of covering our weapons project needs for the least cost and therefore the fastest unlock possible. And then once we're done with these two, then we can pop to, I need to get the, where are they? I need to get the cav reform and the artillery reform unlocked pretty early as well, so that we can have, decent sized artillery and cav units. I do not intend to pursue horse artillery for cav reform 2. I did mention I have got some diplomatic subsidies going, and I'm thinking probably I may just, it'll be a while, but I may save those up for British rifles, or if I'm feeling the pinch on just not getting enough rifles coming, might take Austrian rifles. My understanding is that the imported weapons aren't subject to the whole standardization and production thing, and you can actually get bigger numbers faster, although more expensive. So we'll see how that goes. If I'm not feeling I really need the Austrian rifles by the time it unlocks, Diplo subsidies may just go with the trade deals instead. That leaves policies. First priority has to be military 2 to get those military subsidies flowing. Matter of fact, just take it right now. 45 days for that. As soon as this is done, policy number 2 will be Conscription Act. It's going to open up a lot of manpower. Granted, it's going to be draft manpower. I do not intend to recruit draft brigades. I will only recruit volunteer brigades. But a lot of the replacements going into those brigades to replace casualties and attrition, etc., will be draft manpower. But the other thing is, and this is a CSA only thing, the Union draft counterpart does not have this. As soon as we take this, all existing volunteer contracts are extended to 36 months. That's the main reason for going for this early. Once those two are done, I will probably do government funding next, not because I'm interested in the econ subsidies, as already discussed, but because I want to unlock access to this tariff and also to impressment, which this also is a recruit manpower enhancing measure here as well. Impressment increases number of recruits by 10%, reduces supplies cost by 20%, and its downside is a -3 support. However, CSA states seem to typically do pretty darn good in support, so I'm not too worried about that. We already have King Cotton just open by default, and so after those previous policies, will probably pop to Industrialization 1. I may actually do that before I do government funding. I don't know. But Military 2 and Conscription Act, definitely number 1, number 2. And those two combined are going to take 2.5 months. So by the time those are done, we'll talk more about what to do next, several episodes from now. Anyone who's watched my previous series in Grand Tactician will probably recognize this as kind of my own standard organization for an infantry corps or a main corps. 3 divisions of 3 brigades apiece, each with a smooth bore artillery battalion, an arty division of about 3 rifled artillery battalions, and a division or 2 of a brigade or 2 of cav, sometimes in 1 division or sometimes split into 2 divisions. If all of these are full size, this is almost 33,000 men. I'm trying something different in this campaign, not necessarily because I think it's better, just it's different. And I just want to try a different organization. And what I'm going to go for is smaller but more numerous units. Looks something more like this. Small infantry brigades, the 1,500 man size, and then medium cav and artillery units. Keeping the 3 brigades per division, but 4 divisions, right? This structure works out to about 23,000 men if all of those units are at exactly their recruitment strength, which of course they never will be. The idea here is that at a 1,500 man size, there's a couple of advantages. Number one, the amount of weapons will stretch a little bit farther that way. Of course, that's counterbalanced by the fact that there's more brigades to equip. But in particular, captured weapons, right, don't have to wait for 2,200 or 3,000 captured, say, Springfield rifle muskets to build up before we can equip a brigade with them, right? We can do it at 1,500. And then the idea is maybe this will offer a little bit more kind of flexibility, tactical flexibility on the battlefield. It's a smaller corps overall, but it's still 23. And in practice, these will hover around probably 20,000 or so. And also, just because you recruit at 1,500 doesn't mean that it stays that small. In fact, what'll happen is hopefully they grow a little bit over time if attrition allows. So some of these corps could get a little bit bigger. My idea for distributing them across the theaters is this. I'm going to try something pretty different in this campaign in terms of strategy, in that I'm going to have 6 different armies, the overwhelming majority of which are concentrated in Virginia. I'm just going to have one corps. There'll be armies, right? There will be an army commander over them, but just one corps apiece in the Trans-Mississippi, over in Arkansas, one at Nashville, one at Knoxville, one for Western Virginia, one for the Shenandoah Valley, and one for Northern Virginia. Okay, why have I split it up this way? Trans-Mississippi, purely defensive. I'm not going to try to go into Missouri. I am not going to try to go up into Kentucky either. purely defensive in West Middle Tennessee. East Tennessee, also defensive. But the reason I'm putting a force here is because Knoxville is important. It's the location of our one and only iron mine. And because of that, I intend to put some more industry in that area. So we're going to need a force there just in case. The reason I'm going purely defensive in all of these areas is because it's just a different strategy I want to try. The idea being that if I don't make offensive moves in Missouri and Kentucky, and I don't grow my forces particularly large there, then neither will the Union. That has been now I've often gone offensive in those areas and fought tons and tons and tons of battles, but only when I went into Kentucky and Missouri. If I stay completely defensive, stay in Confederate territory at Nashville and around Carrollton or Fort Smith, I want to see if the Union actually does anything over there. The campaign AI is kind of geared to not only match what you're doing in terms of overall force structure, recruitment levels, but in areas as well. If I don't do anything out west, I don't think the Union will either. And that will allow concentrating more forces in Virginia. And I've got Virginia broken up in 3 different areas, primarily because of the terrain. I want a force in Western Virginia, mainly to ensure that we get control of Grafton and Wheeling. So we have full control of all cities in Virginia. Once that's accomplished, it is possible that the Union may not particularly care about those. And this force may be able to help elsewhere. I'm going to do a separate army in the Shenandoah Valley. And the reason for that is the Blue Ridge Mountains on the map blocks the command radius of an army commander. It is a pain in the butt for one army to cover the regular Northern Virginia area, like around Manassas, Alexandria, etc., and also flex over to the Shenandoah Valley. So I'm just going to have a separate army over there. And then finally, the main army, and where I intend to do most of the fighting and have it will be in the Northern Virginia area. Even though our capital is not going to be at Richmond. But Virginia is still an important state. There's some industry there. And of course, if we can, we would like to take Washington, D.C. and go offensive in Maryland. With that smaller brigade size, putting all this together should take about 180,000 troops. And will require 232 separate commanders, which I think we can cover. I think there's enough decent colonels in the CSA pool, and plus we're going to have a few extra avatar generals for fewer units as well. Anyway, that's kind of the idea on Army force structure. Will this work? I don't know. May get pretty soon in the campaign and figure out, oh man, that 1,500 man brigade thing just ain't working. They need to be bigger. Or also, they are attacking in the West. I need some more corps at Nashville. That could all happen too. But this is kind of my starting idea. So let's have a look at the armies here at campaign start. They are mostly the same armies, just default started. I have renamed some, not all of them, and done some organization. We'll just start right over here in Virginia. So we have the Army of the Potomac that I have already renamed the Army of Northern Virginia. This is our biggest force under the command of Beauregard. Robert E. Lee is ineligible at this stage to command this army. I've organized it into 3 infantry divisions with an artillery division. There is no cav. And there are several viewer units in this army. We've got the Graham's Legion under Robert F. Graham, Mississippi Rifle Armed. We've got, that's not a viewer. Yeah, that's the only viewer unit in this division. In the 2nd Division under A.P. Hill, we've got the Louisiana Tigers under Richard Taylor. The Confederacy designs, there's not really a zouave option, but I've got the red and white trousers. And this was kind of, since there isn't a zouave design, this was kind of like the dandy-ish one available for the Confederacy. And then over here in the 3rd Division, we've got the Yell County Rifles under Patrick Claiborne. And the reason why I put this brigade over here is that for as many viewer units as I could, I just modified existing units. Right? So if somebody wanted, say, a Georgia brigade, I hunted around for a Georgia brigade already in existence and changed the name, the commanders, and the uniforms and everything. Somewhat strangely, this is an Arkansas unit way over here in the Army of the Potomac. Campaign start unit. I didn't create this. So that's why the Yell County Rifles under Claiborne are over here in Virginia. Right next door, we've got the Army of the Shenandoah. Did not change the name on this one, under Joseph Johnson. I think there's a couple of viewer units in here as well. We've got the 1st Georgia Sharpshooters. And I looked for a brigade that already had Mississippi's, and they did. And under Anderson, as requested. And then we've also got in this same division, the 82nd All-American under Henry H. Shelton. Springfield Rifle Muskets. And given the 82nd's patch colors, red and blue seemed appropriate for them. So there you go. And over here in the 2nd Division, we've got the Green Jacket Volunteers. All green, rifle armed, under Paul Reynolds. Also in Virginia, now normally at campaign start in 1861 start, I will take the Army of the Northwest and combine it with the Hampton Division. I'm not doing that. I'm leaving them separate. This, it's only like a brigade. But this will probably eventually become another corps in the Army of Northern Virginia when the Army Corps structure comes along. Right now, here, we only have, we've got 1 brigade and 1 artillery. And their first job is going to be eventually, they're going to need some more forces, but their first job is going to be to take Fort Monroe. In this division, though, we've got another viewer unit, the Cazadores Españoles. Hopefully I didn't butcher that too much, under Colonel Hector Davila, rifle armed. This will eventually be our, well, it is now, but it will grow. And this is eventually going to be our force in Western Virginia. And it may have to stay here if there's some fighting. Otherwise, it may pop over and be stationed in the Shenandoah. We'll have to see how that works out. I don't think I've got any viewer units in this army. No. Tolliver, Pegram, and yeah, I don't. Do have D.H. Hill in divisional command here, though. And their job is going to be eventually trying to take Grafton and Wheeling. Whether they are able to do, they're not going to be able to do that immediately because there's a pretty decent sized federal army here at Grafton. In Tennessee, the Campaign Start Polk's Command is already renamed the Army of Tennessee under Albert Sidney Johnson. I don't think I have any VIR units here. I don't think so. Still very small. It only started with a brigade and artillery, and I just started off recruiting a few brigades directly into this army. And these are all Tennessee troops, so they should be here fairly soon. 14 days, 13 days, 12 days, but that's not recruited. This is transferred. This is a campaign start unit, the Arkansas Mounted Rifles, coming over from the Trans-Mississippi. A little bit unique in that this is a cavalry unit with mixed muskets, which is normally not possible. It is also 2,500 men, which is at the moment not recruitable either prior to the cavalry reform project. So they're a little bit unique in that regard. And because of that weaponry, if these guys see action, I will most likely kind of use them as dismounted or mounted infantry and, have them fight dismounted. If I were to, I can't even do it because, well, I guess, yeah, I don't even have enough mixed cav weapons in the inventory to give them. But theoretically, if I were to swap these out, I would not then be able to swap the mixed muskets back in, even on this unit. Over in this theater, I have combined, we started with two forces over here, the Western Army and the Missouri State Guard. And I have combined them under Benjamin McCulloch. And I think we do have a couple of viewer units here. We've got the Outlaw Brigade under Josie Wales. That seemed appropriate for Missouri. And I think there's another one. Yes, the Gasconade Guards under John Marmaduke, Cav over here. Mixed Cav weapons, that's all we got. But it is a 1,200-man Cav unit, which is enormous at this stage of the campaign. And I know I've already said, hey, I intend to be defensive over here and just see if the Union doesn't do anything. So it's possible, by the broad strategy, I won't be doing much with this army or this one. However, it would be a pretty weird campaign if there wasn't some fighting here. I think that Josie Wales and John Marmaduke they're going to see some action one way or another. I'm pretty sure of it. I have also set up some, and then we've also got this little starting Army of Florida here. No viewer units here. Normally, I just take this force and I send it up here and combine it with the Army of Tennessee. However, similar to the Hampton Legion, I'm leaving them separate. I'm leaving them down here to initially capture Fort Pickens if they can. And they're going to need a few more guys to do that. And then these forces will either fold up into and become part of the Army of Tennessee, or I may move them up and they will form the beginning of the force that I intend to keep here in the Appalachian Valley near Knoxville. I have also set up some recruiting commands. I set one up here in Virginia, but right now, Virginia is tapped out. There is only one unit I'm recruiting here, and this is a viewer unit as well that was just requested. This is the 2nd Maryland Brigade under George Maryland Stewart. I had run out of rifles. So you just got Springfield muskets for now in the light and dark blue as requested. I will mention this, though. Maryland state support is not high. This unit, I recruited the Maryland troops, but I don't know how this brigade is going to perform because Maryland is a union state and cannot flip. It can be occupied, but that's not something that's going to happen quickly. So anyway, but we'll see how these guys do. So there is a recruiting depot at Richmond, but except for that one unit I got from Maryland, there's nothing to recruit. In Virginia, at the moment, we have 0 manpower. And the reason for that is because all of Virginia's manpower is already in service. It forms big chunks of both the Army of Northern Virginia and the Army of the Shenandoah. That's why there's no recruits in Virginia. They've already completely mobilized. I have a Department of the Carolinas, which the game put them at Wilmington. I've got them moving up to Raleigh, where they should be. And this administrative command under Theophilus Holmes is going to recruit units from North and South Carolina. And I've already got a bunch coming. I'll mention now, right now, this tooltip says we've got 58,000 volunteers available. I have already recruited most of them. Got 7 brigades from the Carolinas already recruiting. And remember, these are small brigades. These are 1,500-man brigades. That's how I was able to get 7 right here at the start. And there are several viewer units here. This kind of surprised me. I'd never really noticed this before. There are no North Carolina brigades at campaign start in the summer 1861 start. So, and there were several North Carolina units in South Carolina. So we've got here the Mr. Beast Tigers, rifle armed, no commander requested. I gave him William Loring. It's pretty good general. And here we've got the Durham Light Infantry, red coat, white trousers. Sorry, I had run out of rifles. Your Springfield musket armed at the moment, under the command of anybody you like. There you go, worms. We've got the Swedish Carolines. It looks green here, but it shows up much more yellow on the battlefield. So the yellow jacket, the blue trousers, same thing, Springfield muskets under Anders Stecken. And the Hamptons South Carolinians under Colonel Wade Hampton. And I did have Mississippi rifles for those. So these 4 are viewer units from North and South Carolina, and we got 3 other brigades coming as well. Another interesting note is Cuba. Cuba had about 1,800 volunteers available because of the filibuster starting project. And so that's enough for one brigade, one small brigade, but I didn't really know how well that Cuba would be able to keep up with the replacements for it. So my other thought is we can use Cuba to source a lot of our artillery battalions. And so I've got, no, this is South Carolina artillery here. Somewhere I've got some Cuba artillery. I think they may be down here in the Georgia department, where I decided that would be a good place to park Leonidas Polk in command of that. Several Georgia brigades coming. None of these are viewers. Yeah, no, that's Georgia R2. I know I recruited some Cuba artillery. I've also got a little CAV unit recruiting in most of these administrative commands. Here's some Tennessee, Alabama, and Mississippi brigades recruiting here. Yeah, these are the Cuba artillery units. One thing that did become clear, though, there are no Cuban officers, which means there are no volunteers or political officers eligible to command these units. So it does require West Pointers to command any of the units from Cuba or Nicaragua. And I think I recruited an infantry brigade from Nicaragua as well. I don't remember where. And then finally, there is a recruiting command in the Trans-Mississippi. It plopped it at Fort Smith. It's headed down to Little Rock. Some Louisiana brigades recruiting, and some Texas brigades recruiting, as well as another viewer unit. Now they're small because of pre-CAV reform, but this was a requested viewer unit, Ryan's Raiders, under the command of Ryan Barley, Texas CAV, and because they're so small, I was able to give them some Maynard carbines. Now later, when I get the CAV reform project, and I will probably recruit some filler brigades to plus up the size of CAV and ARTI units. My understanding is that in 1.09, which we are... This is the 1.09 beta that I'm playing in. I don't think that magic weapon from combining brigades happens anymore. So when Ryan's Raiders gets plussed up in size, they might lose their Maynards. I don't know. I haven't tried that yet. But the notes indicate that is no longer a thing. Now, as a unit naturally grows in size from replacements, I think they still keep their weapons. It doesn't prevent the unit from growing. So they're still kind of, quote, magic weapons, unquote, that way, but not from combining brigades anymore. So the patch notes say. Okay, and I think that pretty much covers the Army structure. That leaves Naval. Okay. So our Navy basically has 3 objectives, 3 missions, if you will. Number 1, put some scouts out along these rivers for vision and hopefully maybe once in a while prevent the Union from using river transport if necessary. Number 2, kind of mitigate the blockade. what I've done in the past is all these little starter fleets along the coast, I would strip them of all their small ships and use them to make more scouting fleets for the rivers, gunboats and fourth-rate steamers and schooners and crap like that. That was probably a mistake. I have somewhat recently become aware that the mere presence of a fleet in a port helps to mitigate blockade effectiveness. I'm not sure by how much, but that's my understanding. And so all these starter fleets, I'm leaving them pretty much as they are. There's quite a few here at New Orleans. And so that should help lower the percentage of the Union blockade fleets. So I'm leaving these alone. They're all pretty much as start. I did have a few ready to go ships in the harbor pool. And so I've created 3 or 4 little scout fleets at like Memphis and Decatur and Nashville. So we got our first few scouts going. And then the third mission is eventually, and this is going to take a while to do. This is many episodes in the future. Probably the very late winter or possibly or the spring of 1862 is to actually clear the blockade. Right? Defeat the Union blockade ports. And some of them aren't visible on the map, but there's a fleet here. There's a fleet here. There's a fleet over here. I'm going to clear them out. And the way I'm going to do that is, and anyone who's seen my previous campaigns knows I've kind of done this sort of thing before. In the current state of the game, ironclads are kind of superfluous in the sense that the AI doesn't really use them, doesn't build and use them. Or it may build them, I don't know. But enemy ironclads rarely present a problem. The only ironclad that I've ever faced, and this was in a Union campaign, is the Confederacy does start with CSS Virginia building, and it's 30% complete. And so I have run into the AI using that up at Norfolk. It was defeated, but then it was transferred down to Charleston. And we eventually sank it. We kind of got lucky. It got an ammo explosion. Other than that, but I just don't see the need to build ironclads because we just rarely face them. Therefore, a fleet of plain old frigates, I have found, is pretty much enough to do what needs to be done at sea in the naval aspect of this game. And I've used that before pretty successfully. What I haven't done before is clear both the Gulf of Mexico and the Atlantic coast simultaneously. So what I'm doing, I want to clear the blockade faster than I have done in previous campaigns. So I am building $27 frigates. And that's because you can build 9 with one click. So I did it 3 times. Yeah, with the 27 frigates, we will be able to create a frigate fleet in the Gulf, a frigate fleet for the Atlantic, and have enough spares left over that we can cycle frigates in and out and keep them moving, clearing out Union blockade fleets more quickly. Send a fleet of 7 frigates, pop this blockade fleet. Some will get banged up, swap them out, fresh frigates, pop this blockade fleet. Cobble together the best 7 out of the ones remaining, come over, pop this blockade fleet. And then same up along the Atlantic coast. And once these blockade fleets are cleared out, then we got a lot of frigates, some of which I'll have to repair. And we'll have a pretty robust force, or possibly dismantling some for Navy upkeep costs. But we'll still have some left over to come up here and blockade some northern ports. So rivers, a little bit of blockade mitigation early in the campaign, and then a lot of frigates to clear the blockade, which will free up some of these smaller ships and these existing fleets, then to move and put more scouts on the rivers if needed. And up here on these rivers as well, if needed. Up in the Chesapeake, if needed. And I didn't mention it before, but I did build a few of the very cheapest, the ship's tender gunboats, to do the same sort of thing. Last thing I want to talk about before ending this episode is buildings. Already talked about how there's going to be separate armies in different theaters and where they're operating. And what I'm going to do, I've kind of done this before, but I'm kind of refining it just a little bit. Richmond, Knoxville, Nashville, and kind of this Fort Smith, Carrollton area. These are where the Army is going to operate. In each of those hubs, I'm going to put some buildings. A market, because what markets do is help infrastructure. And the idea is that will help, I think that will help move supplies to the areas where those armies are. A little bit, should help a little bit. Hospital for dealing with battle casualties. And one building I haven't used a lot before, but I'm going to try a little bit more this campaign, is news agency to assist with intelligence. I had recorded an earlier session of actually placing these buildings. However, something went wrong with the audio. So I've already placed them. I've got a hospital, a market, and a news agency in the Fort Smith area. Same thing at Nashville. I put the news agency and the market somewhere around here. Yeah, here. At Knoxville, I didn't put the hospital yet because we don't have the Army here yet. And also there's no supply depot yet. These other two cities already had supply depots anyway from campaign start. And then there was already a hospital and a news agency here at Richmond. I thought I had built a market. I guess not. So I need a market here at Richmond. It's a good thing I came back to look at this. And then I put an additional hospital up here. Because I think from this hospital, this army is probably getting some benefit from that. It's not showing a modifier because time hasn't run yet. But I don't think the army of the Shenandoah is getting the benefit. So I'm putting a hospital here, kind of near Front Royal, so that this whole area is covered by hospital coverage. And this area over here on this side of the mountains actually will get double benefit from both hospitals. POW camp. In 1.09, the capacity increased, as we know. And we saw that in the last campaign playing as Union. I'm not sold that it's still really worth the cost, particularly as CSA. It's not like the Union's going to run out of manpower, right? However, they've got a POW camp. Camp Chase. That's a campaign start POW camp, right? They didn't build that. They just start with it, just like I did. And I'll be damned if I'm going to let them have a POW camp and keep our guys and us not keep their guys. So I don't know if it's the smartest thing in the world to spend money on, but yeah, I built one here at Talladega. So we're going to have a prison camp. And what this burning down is built a lot of buildings, recruited a ton of troops, built 27 damn frigates. So I am burning down some of the supply depots, right? There's one here at, I thought I had burned this one down. There we go. We're never going to use this one at Galveston. Let's get rid of it. Not spend money on it. And hopefully some of these goodies will go to our other supply depots. There's one here at New Orleans. We're never going to use that. Burning it down. There's one in Montgomery. Burning it down. One in Atlanta. Burning it down. Well, dismantling it. It's our supply depot. But that's what it says. And I think there may be one somewhere else. I can't remember. But there's at least 4 supply depots we're just not going to use. And so getting rid of them. And I think that about covers it. Anyway, spent a ton of money right here at the start before even running time. A lot of buildings, ton of brigade recruitment, 27 frigates. This credit rating is not going to stay at AA minus. It may drop straight. It may drop several notches. It may go to BBB plus. I'm not sure. About Knoxville, mentioned the whole reason for having an army here is here's our only iron mine. There is an iron works here. In the middle in that chain, we need iron ore to be made into iron first. That happens in a foundry. So at some point, I'm going to be building a foundry here at Knoxville. Iron mine will feed the foundry, which feeds the ironworks. We have a couple of other foundries here and there. There's some in Nashville. There's one in Virginia, at least one in Virginia, maybe 2. But having all 3 of those right close together, I'm hoping will help. And the first use of our industrial subsidies, however, is going to be to upgrade this iron mine to tier 2. If I were to do it right now, that would cost $20 million. If I wait for the industrial subsidies, it will cost $3.9 million. So we're going to wait for the subsidies. That's the first thing we're going to do with it. Upgrade this mine. And then probably the next thing I will do is build a foundry somewhere in this area. So this is pretty important for us for producing. In the ironworks is where weapons comes from. And I think artillery ammunition, weapons, and small arms ammunition come from the ironworks. I think. I know the weapons do. And about 99% sure about the artillery. I'm not 100% sure about the ammo. That may come from factories. In any case, we need that stuff. That's why Knoxville is important. That's why I'm going to put a little army here. Make sure that the Federals don't grab it. I don't think they will. But we've seen them kind of come down through here before. And just don't want them doing that. Okay. Pretty long episode. And I think that will do. And we've kind of covered a lot of information. And we'll be ready to get things rolling in the next episode. And the way, kind of the first situation here is Northern Virginia, 2 federal armies, 2 rebel armies. The combined strength of these 2 Yankee armies is almost, not quite, but almost double the combined strength of these 2 rebel armies. So the trick here on the campaign map is trying to engineer a situation where both of our armies meet only one of these armies to prevent them from reinforcing each other. So there's going to be a little bit of dancing that has to happen on the campaign map. Often, even usually, that first battle will occur over here in the Manassas area, as it did historically, the first Battle of Bull Run, right? However, I've also seen it where this army over here may move up the river and we wind up fighting our first battle up in the Winchester area. That could happen too. We'll just have to see how it plays out. In any case, I'm very much looking forward to playing this campaign. I hope you're looking forward to watching it. If you like this kind of content, if you like what we're doing with the channel, then leave a like, leave a comment, maybe even subscribe. There's only the one episode for now, but if you're watching this later, as the series has developed, and you want to go find your way to future episodes, I'm linking the playlist here. At any rate, thank you very, very much for watching. I appreciate it.